But I know Mr. Carney is a man of very high ethics. At the end of the day, his job as a chairman of a board is to act in the best interests of shareholders. I'm sure he did that, but in terms of the specifics, you've got to ask Mr. Carney. Unfortunately, Mr. Singh has been throwing out all kinds of ideas that, to be honest with you, make very little sense. It's like when he said that we should cut off cobalt exports to the United States. Cobalt and lithium. We almost export none of both of those things. Like, at the end of the day, he needs to perhaps find new advisors who can actually provide something more thoughtful for him to say.
Received about when the tariffs are going to come in.
Well, I'm sure you all follow the news. We're following it as closely as possible. We obviously see the various declarations coming out of the U.S. We're preparing for all scenarios.
And what
the March 4th tariffs are still on, as far as you're concerned?
Well, that appears to not be what he said today, but we'll see.
Well, he also said they could be ongoing, but then April 2nd might be something else.
So we're going to wait till something happens, something's on paper. But in any scenario, Canadians should be very reassured that the government's prepared.
How difficult is it to manage this file right now and to deal with this when you consider that it seems like either you're watching TV to see what he says or that you don't even know where it's coming from?
It is clear that, you know, there seems to be a blistering amount of new policy, but policy is not policy until it's enacted, and when Canada sees policy enacted, then we'll react, and we're prepared for all the scenarios.
That's the last question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Minister,
Not all you guys are on holidays.
do we want to explore more LNG? Is that kind of the flavor and the feeling right now?
Well, I mean, look, we've been working on liquid natural gas exports for the past number of years. As you probably know, LNG Canada 1 will come on stream in the next couple of months. Woodfibre is under construction. Cedar has gone through its FID. There's obviously lots of conversations about LNG Canada 2. If you take all of those as one, that's half the gas that we export to the United States right now. So we're looking at diversification options. It's important that we do that in the current environment.
What about on the East Coast?
On the East Coast, look, we looked very hard at this. I worked with the CEO of TC Energy, the CEO of Repsol, on the idea of refitting that LNG import facility to become an export facility. The challenge was you've got to ship gas from Alberta all the way to New Brunswick, and you have to upgrade the infrastructure for what is a relatively modest amount of gas. When the company did the work on that, they came to the conclusion they would have to charge a price for the gas that would exceed what folks can get elsewhere.
Do you think he needs to come clean on the Brookfield move, though?
What I would say is, irrespective of this particular instance, anyone who knows anything about business knows that boards actually have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. I wasn't in the room. I don't know what the conversations were. But I know Mr. Carney is a man of very high ethics. At the end of the day, his job as a chairman of a board is to act in the best interests of shareholders. I'm sure he did that. But in terms of the specifics, you've got to ask Mr. Carney.
President Trump says that he doesn't need our oil.
Pardon me?
Does it hurt Canada when President Trump says that he doesn't need our oil?
Look, I mean, President Trump has said a lot of things. And with due respect, there are certain things that he said that probably are not fully founded on the facts. At this point in time, the Americans produce 13.5 million barrels a day of oil, light sweet crude. They actually use 16.5 million barrels of oil. What we provide to them is not only the gap between those two numbers, but we provide heavy crude, which is way more cost effective for them to refine. Their refineries are set up in the Midwest and the Gulf Coast to use heavy crudes. ExxonMobil just refitted one refinery to use light sweet crudes. It took 4 years. It cost $4 billion. So when he says he doesn't need the oil, I think he needs to actually sit down and look at those issues. I had a meeting with the Secretary of Energy from the United States last week. I think he very much understands that. He's somebody who actually understands Canada well, and I expect that I will be seeing him in Houston 2 weeks from now. We'll have another conversation about this.
What Trump said today that tariffs are coming on Mexico and Canada on April 2nd now. Are tariffs being delayed from March 4th?
Well, there's been a number of dates that have been put forward with different rationales. I think the early March date was focused, or at least many in his administration have said, is focused primarily on the border. At the end of the day, I have been going to Washington, as have a number of my colleagues, and I will be there next week again, to make the argument that tariffs actually are going to cause significant damage to the United States and are going to raise the prices of groceries, gasoline, home heating, electricity, for Americans in many parts of the country. That's not a good thing for the United States, and it's certainly not a good thing for Canada. I don't think tariffs are a foregone conclusion, but we need to continue to have the conversation with them, and that's why I'm going down there again next week. So thank you.
It's possible that these are still coming on March 4th?
I wouldn't want to make the decision from President Trump. At the end of the day, he has obviously is the final decision maker, but we are working very hard to ensure that they are not put into place.
Jagmeet Singh, he said that Trump should not be invited to the G7 because, look, he's calling for Canada to become part of the U.S. Do you think he should be there?
Look, President Trump obviously has said a number of things that have made Canadians, that have offended Canadians, made many Canadians very angry. I have been very offended, and I have been quite angry about some of the things that he has said. But at the end of the day, we need to find pathways to work with the Americans. We are not going to sort of cut ourselves off and float into the ocean. They are going to be our neighbors going forward. And we need to find pathways to have better conversations than what we're having right now. That is what we are endeavoring to do. I don't think that simply trying to throw the president out of the G7 is a particularly constructive approach. But unfortunately, Mr. Singh has been throwing out all kinds of ideas that, to be honest with you, make very little sense. It's like when he said that we should cut off cobalt exports to the United States. Cobalt and lithium. We almost export none of both of those things. Like, at the end of the day, he needs to perhaps find new advisors who can actually provide something more thoughtful for him to say.